In the beginning, there was me, Dr. Roger Gewald, with The Gospel According to Dr. Roger, the show where we review the news stories of today and everything that's happening in the world, and we unpick them for you to give you the unvarnished truth, what's really behind what all the big people are saying, what's really going on. No gaslighting, no rubbish, no BS, I promise. And the same from my guests. And I'm about to go now, and I need to change into something more formal, I'm sure, and have an interview with one of my favorite people. Alex Phillips is a former Brexit member of European Parliament and the muse of both Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, and an absolute powerhouse broadcaster. She is incredible. She's not only a good friend of mine, she is one of the people on Talk, formerly Talk TV, who I idolize. She is so powerful and so bright and so amazing. Here's a prediction from Dr. Roger. If Reform gets in as the leader of the United Kingdom in the next general election, my mate, Liam Halligan, will be the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I think. And Alex Phillips, my own Alex Phillips, will be either the Foreign Secretary or the Home Secretary. That's my prediction. She is amazing, and I hope you enjoy her. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, not too bad.
Now you were, can I say, Nigel Farage's right hand, right arm, shoulder, and everything for a very, very long time. I mean, you still are Madam Reform. And I want to ask you, with everything going on with Keir Starmer and his government, and every day there's another revelation. He's going to give away the money from overseas aid for defense instead for the Chagos Islands. I mean, every day there's another thing. I mean, do you think that, I mean, I suppose it's almost a rhetorical question. Yeah. I mean, is Nigel the solution for what this poor country needs?
Yeah, of course he is. I think reform is the solution because what we know is the two legacy parties basically proffer the same things over and over again. They argued amongst themselves at pre-election that it was all going to be about growth. Neither of them have got a plan for growth. That has been spelled out historically. You can see that to be the case. And what we need in Britain is the sort of dramatic and purposeful sort of reform that America's got under Trump. And I think that only reform want to actually deliver that. But the thing is, it's going to be very difficult. You need radicals because the solutions are going to have to be radical. Britain is more embedded in a deep state than America ever
Yeah.
was. And you can
Well said. Absolutely.
yeah, you can see what's going on with Doge. We're going to have to do Doge on steroids in this country. We're going to have to wipe out a whole load of legislation with a great repeal bill. We're going to have to essentially deal with these judges and figure out how we can make sure that Parliament has sovereignty over them, which a part of that will be getting rid of the Supreme Court. We've got to leave the ECHR. We've also got to essentially try and expunge from the civil service anybody who is uncooperative, because frankly, the bureaucrats run the country and politicians are their puppets over here. And that's why nothing really gets done.
So with all these politicians defecting from the Tories and Labour to reform, and all of these voters in various polls doing likewise, reform is the best challenge to Labour and all the craziness going on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, historically, if you look at the support for UKIP, of which I was part, one third of the vote came from Labour, a third came from the Conservatives, a third from people who just haven't voted before. And I think that reform attracts similar shares when it comes to their voting demographic, but far bigger now because people are fed up with the legacy parties. There's essentially a revolt now against business as usual across Europe. It's, the so-called rise of populism, because people have had enough of essentially not being listened to, of open borders, of stagnant economies, of net zero, of all the things that we've been told are sort of sacrosanct and can never be changed or messed with. Voters are saying these things are tying us up in a straitjacket. We want a country that is free to do business, to manufacture, where we have freedom of speech, where we don't have our communities overtaken by swaths of people from other countries who don't share our values. We want to be put first again. And that is the revolution that's happened in America. And you can see Donald Trump is delivering on everything he promised and with real intent and vigor. And that is now what a lot of Europeans want. It'll be interesting to see at the next general election what happens, because what we have seen in other countries, from France to Germany, is a deliberate sort of collusion to make sure there's a cordon sanitaire against populist parties, to make sure they're not part of coalitions, and that they are demonized and that people don't vote for them. So even though right now Reform's polling looks good, you know that the muscular machinery of state is going to double down on trying to prevent Reform forming a government of any kind. So Reform has to win big. That means people are going to have to hold their nerve, and they're going to have to ignore when the media come with their smear campaigns, as they will do. They'll be collecting
and that's why Nigel building all these grassroots village coalitions and local chairmen is a brilliant strategy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing is with Reform, where it sort of emanated from the Brexit Party, which was set up in an emergency to contend European elections that weren't even supposed to happen, it was all surface and no substance underneath. So there weren't branches. There wasn't a party structure, which is so important on then delivering results at a general election when it comes to campaigning and coordinating, get out the vote, etc., and just building, a loyal vote base. So he's actually had to start doing all of that from scratch, because Reform largely, before he came back, was synthetic. It, hadn't had the capacity or ability to build out in a significant way. So it's a lot of hard work, but we are still a long way off a general election. So there's time to get things done. But like I said, I just hope that right now that it's clear the British public are in revolt. They are fed up with the legacy parties. I just hope that is still the appetite come the next general election. And 4 years, haven't passed, that people have forgotten all of the harms that have been done by both the Conservative and the Labour parties.
So, mega, make England great again. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we need. And what's interesting, Sir Keir Starmer's gone over to Washington, D.C., and is suddenly going to come up with his whole tranche of populist policies because Donald Trump says he has to. And he's applying great force against the United Kingdom, including the security of the whole of Europe, saying to Europe, you've got to step up, you've got to pay for more defense. But not just that, the side issues here are also, you've got to manage your borders. You've got to reject net zero so you have energy security. You need to have food security. You cannot keep making dreadful decisions for your own countries and for your own people. And when, as a result of those dreadful decisions, you find yourself in a predicament, turn around to America and say, please bail us out. And that's really the message from the White House to Starmer. And it's interesting, he's turned around and said, yes, 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 I'm going to cut foreign aid to increase defense spending. As you alluded to earlier, the worry is that that's going to pay off this Chagos deal, which is absolutely dreadful, giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. I'm hoping that Donald Trump will block it. I think there's
of course.
That he will. But would Sir Keir Starmer have been doing any of those things were it not for
No, I published yet another article yesterday saying that Starmer, my prediction is that Starmer is going to become Trump's rhymes with itch. He has no other choice. I predicted in this piece all the changes that are going to happen with free speech, with the Chagos Islands, with Ukraine, with Gaza.
Yeah.
He's going to do exactly as he's told, or he won't survive.
I mean, he would do
I just think that's it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly he's going to have to do what he sold over Chagos, I'd imagine, and he's going to try and meet those defense expectations. When it comes to free speech, it's not in his instinct to row back on that. And the only way to row back on it, like I said, is now to repeal a lot of legislation.
Yeah.
And he is a lawyer at heart. He likes saying, I follow international law. Is he going to be willing to leave the ECHR? No. Is he going to be willing to scrap the Human Rights Act? No.
He's not a lawyer. He's not a lawyer at heart. like Kamala, and God forbid had we had the two of them, he's a prosecutor at heart.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
my AI research has told me that there has never been a country in the world where the leader was a former prosecutor. And if we had had the US and the UK with two of them, oh my gosh, you know.
Right. We'd have been in big trouble. And this is what I'm saying. If it wasn't for Donald Trump in the White House floating the spectre of tariffs over the UK and European security, would Starmer be doing any of these things? No. But because of what he would actually need to do technically, mechanically, politically, legislatively, to now protect free speech, they are things he will find unconscionable. Those are not going to happen because the Labour Party itself wouldn't back him. But where, he can do the changes, he is being bullied by Trump. And I think he's going to get down on his knees and take a whipping, frankly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Lammy and the others along with him. You just watch. I mean,
Yeah.
people keep saying, "Oh, you're crazy, Dr. Roger." No, that'll never. I mean, I've laid out the whole scenario in Australia and publications all over the place, and I stand by it. But
Well,
let me ask you something. One thing I haven't been able to figure out, and nobody's been able to answer for me, is you alluded to it a minute ago. Europe, the EU, has all moved in the other direction, and they've all had enough of this stuff. They've had enough of this nonsense, and I wouldn't say led by far right parties, but with some influence from them, they're all moving on their own to, let's call it, a strong center right position. And we, who Brexited for goodness sake, have gone the other way into wokeism and lefty lunacy,
yeah.
as Rita Panahi calls it. And why? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, that's quite easy to explain. So, first of all, we are the same as Europeans. We actually started all of this with Brexit. We were the first country to
Yeah,
actually embrace populism. We were the
yeah,
vanguard of the revolution that's sweeping across the West in general. And the Europeans are all asking for change. They're not getting it. Don't pretend that they are. You look at the recent German election results where AfD came a stonking second, not allowed anywhere near any sort of coalition deal. You look at France, where in the snap election, all the other parties, including hard left communist parties, colluded with Macron to make sure that Rassemblement National didn't win that election. So as much as the European people want change, the political elites are continuing to double down and stop that from happening. Now, in the UK, interestingly, if you look at the Labour Party, yes, they've got a vast majority at the moment, but their vote share went down. They got fewer votes in this most recent general election than before, than the previous election that Jeremy Corbyn lost. So what happened wasn't a sudden sort of uptick of enthusiasm and support for the Labour Party. What happened was a rejection of the Conservative Party for not being right-wing enough. And there were some people who were sort of, less politically engaged who thought, well, let's give the Labour Party a chance because they haven't had a go for 3 terms now, thinking that it has to be a binary choice in the United Kingdom.
yeah.
And so Labour won by default, but they haven't suddenly got a huge sort of, surge of popularity. It's the opposite direction. We've just got a system that sadly rewards failure.
Yeah, it's only 20% of the country elected them.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
when you look at the polling now, it's hard to imagine how they could muddle through a general election and win it, but we are a long way off from that. So,
You don't think there's any chance of an earlier general election, huh?
well, how? By what mechanism? Because that would involve Sir Keir Starmer and, well, the Parliament itself would call an early election.
Yeah.
And the only way I can see that happening, the Labour Party going, right, okay, let's have a general election and lose all of our seats that we've got and lose all the power that we've got and, lose this massive majority that we're currently enjoying, would be if the country was plunged into an actual crisis. So I'm talking about something like mass civil unrest. Unless we face that, which actually is not off the cards, but unless we face that, I cannot see, the turkeys voting for Christmas. I can't see the Labour Party or Sir Keir Starmer going, oh, do you know what? Yeah, not really enjoying this. Maybe we should have a go at getting ourselves out of office. It's for the birds.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. What about free speech, Alex? Political correctness, media representation. Do you think that free speech is really under threat in the UK, and what measures, if any, can be taken to protect it?
So the thing is, free speech in the UK is not actually accounted for legislatively. We don't have a constitution. It's just
No.
there. We expect it to exist. But the
Do,
problem is,
do you, do, I'm sorry to interrupt. Does that make a difference, do you think, that it's not written down?
well, it does now. We're seeing that it does because now what we're having is layer upon layer of other legislation, which is essentially having the effect of corroding free speech, such as hate crimes, which are connected to the Human Rights Act and things like that. So other legislation is now impinging upon what was always, an expected thing to exist. But to protect it, we have to have a great repeal bill and lose all of that legislation. But we're also going to need to see a sort of cultural change because a lot of people don't realize how restricted their free speech is. But imagine if you ask people, how many times have you thought something and thought, I can't say that out loud? How many times have you sort of wanted to disclose your political position or your viewpoint on a, hot topic and thought, I dare not say that because of the way people are going to react?
Especially recently.
Right, especially recently. So even if you take out the fact that people have actually been imprisoned for posts on social media, which is, an absolute travesty, none of those cases would have actually been proven in a court of law if those people hadn't been cajoled by the CPS to plead guilty. None of them would have stood the test of a trial, I don't think. Um, but if you take apart the fact that people are languishing in jail because of things they wrote on social media, even if you put that to one side, it's very clear we live in a country now where there is a fundamental expectation. You can't say this. You're not allowed to believe that. These opinions are toxic. These politics are beyond the pale, and we all go along with it, or we feel like we have to go along with it because if we don't, we feel we might not get that promotion at work. That we
But
might.
not even that only. I mean, that's only half of it. You've got this guy, Mike Ambery, who punched the constituent and then kicked him, I believe, while he was down on the ground, got only 10 weeks in prison, which as of this morning has been suspended on appeal. So he walked free. You've got Hugh Edwards, who for years engaged in appalling behavior. He walked free.
Mm,
And you've got, I just can't get over Lucy Connolly,
yeah,
who's in prison for 2 years
yeah.
for a deleted tweet. I
Oh, it's
mean,
disgusting.
where does this disparity come from, and who's supposed to be policing that, if you'll pardon the pun?
You would think it would be people like the Attorney General, the Crown Prosecution Service. And you're right, the disparity is shocking. When it comes to paedophilia, for example, looking at Hugh Edwards, our prison estate is something like 90,000 places, and it's already bursting at the seams.
85,000, I think. Yeah.
85,000. If you were to look at the number of people who are convicted for possession of, and we're talking about the most extreme, category A images of children, it's about 100,000 every year.
Yeah.
So, you actually couldn't, even if you wanted to put all the pedos in prison, you just couldn't. We don't have enough prison places. But no, this is the thing. Over the course of time, we have now got a judicial system that protects the perpetrator and not the victim. And you're seeing this as well with all of these numerous appeals of people who should have been deported. They say, well, I can't be sent home because now I'm a terrorist and they don't like terrorists in my country, or because I'm a paedophile and paedophiles are facing rough justice if I go back from whence I came. And you're having people appealing. It should be the case of, sorry, you're not qualified to stay here, goodbye, and off they go. But you're having people appeal not just once, but twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. How can you get, why have they not been sent away already? How are they having this situation where they're getting access to taxpayers' money to fund these bogus cases where judges keep turning around and actually taking the side of people who are breaking the law? It actually makes no sense. And this is why the challenge that faces whoever wants to try and save Britain is enormous, because you have to get rid of all the legislation that is enabling this. You have to essentially delete it from the canon of case history. And you
Yeah.
also somehow have to clip the wings or get rid of the judges who all seem to have this mad leftist intent of siding with illegals because of, I don't know what, because of politics. I mean,
It's so perverted because, as I said a moment ago, it's not only that they're going to prosecute somebody who tweets something, but the disparity in sentencing.
yeah,
They're going to send Lucy Connolly to prison for 2 years,
right.
while this MP, this elected official. I mean, What if Joe Bloggs walked out of a pub and got in a fight and punched somebody in the nose? You can be sure he'd get a hell of a lot more than 10 weeks.
So the thing is, the UK sort of lives on the cusp of civil unrest. We saw
Yeah.
that with Southport, and the authoritarian way that Starmer handled that, interpreted the sentencing guidelines, or at least got judges to, basically prejudiced all the cases by saying these are far right people who've caused unrest by putting things on social media, lied to the public, lied brazenly to the public about the perpetrator. It had the desired effect, didn't it? Because when we then found out that the Southport murderer was indeed an Islamist terrorist, nobody took to the streets because they were terrified to do so. So Starmer's, authoritarian approach to all of this and his sort of patsy judge's interpretation of sentencing guidelines have had the desired effect, televising them, which I thought was one of the most Orwellian, ghoulish,
Unbelievable.
yeah, really grim. And there might be some people who said, look, this needed to happen because, Britain was on the brink. But the thing is, we remain on the brink. The next flashpoint that happens, I think people are just going to go, fuck it. I think people are just going to say, I can't live like this anymore. I think we're really in a very, very
We're
dangerous.
getting closer. Are we going to have civil unrest? Are we going to have rioting? Are we going to have, for example, Muslim communities, and their neighbors fighting?
Right. Yeah. I think the answer to those questions is it is always a possibility with every passing day. We just need one terror attack like they've had in Germany repeatedly. And then people will say, this is now too much. We can't go on like this. And then if any sort of uprising, if any sort of social unrest or rioting, which again, I think the rioting around the Southport killings was infiltrated and
I
delivered.
think I think that showed us it can happen with a touch paper going up in flames in a second.
If you have, hard rebels like Antifa getting into rioting and deliberately provoking it and
Yeah,
escalating it, fanning the flames,
yeah.
or foreign agents doing that, and then they sort of go after, say, attacking critical infrastructure, we're going to be in a big mess. And, we're a long way away from the general election. Look at the state of our economy. Are we going to have to go cap in hand to the IMF? Look at what's gone on with our energy grid. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility we could face blackouts. Look at what's going on with our food supplies, with farmers selling off their land. If anything happened, 40% of our food's imported. If anything were to happen to disrupt those supplies, as we saw potentially during COVID, we won't be able to eat.
Won't
Or
won't be long before Trump and Musk are living in Regent's Park at the ambassador's house, changing all these things.
Well, Trump will have finished being president before our next general election. As far as I'm aware, we don't really have anything in our legislation that would prevent him coming and standing as prime minister here. And his mother, of course, was Scottish. So, perhaps that's what we could do. We could coax him over to
And
filter.
and Musk, I think I've published articles saying another prediction of mine is I think Musk wants to, he can easily become British because he's got the lineage as well. I think he wants to be prime minister because what do after you run a Tesla,
No,
after you run a SpaceX, after you run X? What do? You want to run a country.
maybe. I mean, who knows? I think, definitely both of them are very keen to save Britain. And you can see that by the way they're handling the UK. But they feel the same way about a lot of Europe at the moment. It's not just Britain. America is looking at Europe and it says, well, this is now an existential crisis for the entirety of the West. And we need Europe to wake up and play its part in saving us civilizationally. Because
Absolutely. Let's go down another rabbit hole. And of course, his plan that, I'll handle Gaza and Europe, you guys handle Ukraine. What do you think about Ukraine? What's happening? I mean, here is Trump calling Zelensky a dictator. Then here's Trump making a fabulous minerals deal, which any politicians aren't businessmen, but any businessman would have done that long ago.
it's easy, Roger. It's easy, isn't it? The one who doesn't need to be brought to the table is Zelensky. Zelensky's at the table begging for a solution. One
Absolutely.
who needs to be appeased and brought to the table to agree to stop fighting is Putin.
Yeah.
So the one who needs to be charmed and beguiled at this stage is Putin. And people go, oh, well, it's appeasement. Do you know what? Would you rather have a peace deal or not? If that involves Trump essentially saying things that he thinks is going to brush Putin's ego and make Putin actually, stop what he's doing, great. Let's just get on with doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I can hear 100 and whatever year old if he were still here, Henry Kissinger going, "Yeah, I told you."
Yeah, exactly. And so once you've managed to get Putin in listening mode, where he thinks he's getting a great deal out of this,
Yeah,
super, yeah, end the fighting. Then what's going to happen? Well, with American interests in 50% of rare earth minerals in Ukraine, those are now partly American assets. So if
absolutely.
Russia wants to encroach any further into Ukraine, they are essentially encroaching onto things that are of interest to the American economy. So
God
that's
bless America. Absolutely. It's a very good strategic
very
plan.
clever. It's really clever. And then what's more, Putin's not going to be around for another 10 years, I wouldn't have thought. I mean, Lord knows what comes up after him. But when you see with any of these sort of peace negotiations or ceasefire negotiations, things can change in the future. Things can be repealed. And I think you've got to have that long-term vision. Stop the fighting now. Make sure there are American interests in Ukraine so Russia dares not dip a toe into that territory.
Right.
Make sure Putin feels that he's sort of walked off a golden bridge and has got what he wants out of all of this. Make sure Europe is ready and has grown up and is, standing up for itself and its continent as it should have done from the beginning. And then, the way to stop Putin in the future is to have energy self-sufficiency. If Europe is able to generate its own energy, lower its electricity prices, bring back manufacturing to our shores, protect its societies by not having open borders, Russian destabilization won't work. And then at the same time, Trump's energy policy of drill, baby, drill will massively reduce the cost of a barrel, which will hammer Russia, absolutely hammer Russia. That is the way to go about this, not just perpetuating. We'll give Ukraine just about enough so it doesn't lose the war, but there's no way it's going to win the war. We've been stuck in this cycle of just, giving Ukraine, yeah, enough to hold the Russians at bay, but you can't go on like that forever.
No,
That's easy.
no. Listening to you, I can't decide whether, I mean, when reform wins, if they do, and Nigel is a prime minister, he's going to make our friend Liam Halligan chancellor, no doubt. But I can't decide whether he's going to make you foreign secretary or home secretary.
Oh, I don't think it'll make me anything, Roger. It'd be nice.
He should. He should.
Culture secretary is the one I like, which sounds like a bit of a waffly nonsense.
What secretary?
Culture.
Culture secretary. Oh,
Yeah.
you'd be wasted.
No, culture has a lot of influence, and
Yes, it has influence locally, but the geopolitical world needs you.
Well, does it? I'd like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, I don't
Look,
like.
thank you. We're out of time, but I want to thank you very much, Alex. You're beautiful in every sense, especially to listen to. You're wonderful. You're so quick and so smart, and you have such unique solutions. You're not bogged down as so many people are in this country and elsewhere on the issues that we've discussed. And it's been a thrill for me. So thank you very much, and we'll have you come back.
Thank you, Roger. It's been a pleasure.